I think for me, I was looking as a young woman for some sort of activity or sport that could get me outside to do things and be in nature and interact with wildlife. And when I got to fly fish for the first time, I was kind of amazed by all of the different aspects that gave me in terms of being outdoors, being in nature, interacting with wildlife. And that's one of the reasons I love to fly fish is it gets me outside. Catching fish is always just a bonus, but for me, that draw to just be in nature is really why I love to fly fish and why I started. I think as a young woman, I was searching for that one outdoor sport or activity that could enable me to get outside more. And I learned to fly fish from my current fiance when I was back in high school. And it just allowed me to really feel at one with nature and the outdoors and still feel active. And that's really why I love to fly fish. But the great thing about it is that everyone has their own why, and that can be different for every person. Some people love to get outside, they love to catch the fish. That's why they love to fly fish. Other people don't care so much about catching the fish, they just want to be on a river or be on the water and be outdoors. So I think that's a great thing about fly fishing is that it's different for every single person, and you can figure out why it's important to you and why you love it. One of the reasons I love to fly fish is because I think it's a very rare thing to be able to interact with wildlife and actually be able to touch wildlife and hold it. And for me, the combination of being outside and being in nature at the same time being able to be with wildlife, that's a really unique and special thing. And that's one thing that I absolutely love. Like the emotion and the feeling that comes from holding a beautiful trout in a crystal clear river. There's really nothing else like that in the world. And for me, that's one of the most special parts. One of the things I've really enjoyed about fly fishing is that it has given me so much purpose when I go and travel. For me, traveling isn't just about going to cities and food, it's more about going to these very remote places in search of a certain fish. And I love being able to go to a new place with a completely different lens than everyone else. I get to see different places, interact with totally different types of people, and they may be off the beaten path, but that's kind of the exciting part. And it's really rewarding to be able to see a different place, a different country through a completely different lens. And I'm just so grateful that fly fishing has allowed me the opportunity to see these different places through this different lens. One of the best parts about fly fishing is that it takes you to some of the most wild and off the beaten places in the world. And that's because the places you're going to find these really beautiful, unique, exotic fish are going to be kind of in the middle of nowhere. And some of my favorite travels have been to places like the Amazon or into the backcountry in New Zealand, into the very southern parts of Patagonia. So that's one of the coolest parts is when you're traveling to fly fish, you're going to these very remote, off the beaten path, hard to get to places that a lot of people can't get to in their lifetimes. And so it's so special to be able to see these places in their wild state and be able to not only see them, but interact with the habitat, interact with the wildlife and the people. One of the best parts about fly fishing is that it can range from going to very off the beaten path, super remote places in the world, or you can go and fly fish literally outside your back door here in the United States or in North America. It's definitely something that you can do anywhere where there's water and where there's fish. So that's a great thing about fly fishing is if I want to go fly fishing one afternoon, I can go outside, drive to a river, go fly fishing, or if I want to plan a fly fishing trip, I can plan someplace really exotic or remote, someplace I've dreamed of going and seeing one day. And it's cool to know that you can really fly fish anywhere that there's water and there's fish. You just have to have the right equipment and the right knowledge for that species in that place. One of the best parts about traveling to fly fish is you get to interact with different locals in these different communities and countries and places where you might go and fly fish. And one of the best parts about that is that you're really meeting and viewing people through a completely different lens than you may see them if you were just traveling for tourism. So when you're traveling to fly fish, you're going to see people in a completely different place in their natural way of life, and maybe their life revolves around fishing, so it's really cool if you can fly fish there but also learn some of the traditional methods of fly fishing which exist. And I just have found it really special, the connections that I've made with completely different types of people all over the globe. And one thing that we have in common is that we love to fish, and sometimes that revolves around fly fishing, sometimes it's about the different traditional methods of fishing that they do, which is really cool to learn as an angler. But yeah, I think there's just something so special about getting to meet people in a different lens than just traveling to see a country. If you're going to fish somewhere, you're gonna meet people that also have the same interests as you, but they're going to teach you a lot of new stuff as well. I love to fly fish with my friends. That's one of the best parts about being out on the water is I have a lot of really good friends that also love to fly fish, and we all go out together, we'll go on trips together, we'll get out on the river, and we just spend time together outside fishing. And that's one of my favorite pastimes with friends is to get out on the river and be outside with them. We're all doing something that we love, and some of my friends don't fly fish, and that's totally fine. One of my favorite things to do is to teach people how to fish. I feel like it's kind of a gift that I can give to other people, so it's really fun for me to go with friends that do fish, but also take a novice with me and teach them how to fish. And hopefully one day, we'll both be on the river together and they'll be enjoying it just as much as I am. Fly fishing allows me to give to others something that brings me a lot of happiness. I love the ability to teach others and give it in a way as a gift to them. And I'm so excited today to be able to do that with you guys. And we're going to talk all about fishing. It's okay if you've learned a little bit of fly fishing, that's great. You're going to learn some more today. If you've never learned anything, that's also totally okay because we're going to talk about all of the basics, try and cover all of our bases here so that if you want to get out and fly fish, you're going to feel like you're pretty comfortable in terms of what you might need or use or do. And I'm really excited about giving this gift to you guys so that you guys can get out on the river and hopefully one day enjoy fly fishing as much as I do. I think in general, fly fishing can be an intimidating sport to get into, and that makes a lot of sense to me because, first of all, it looks like a hard sport to learn. When you're watching people cast, it seems like a hard thing to learn, but the reality is if you learn the right steps, you can actually do it pretty easily. The other thing is it's intimidating because there's a lot of gear involved. And so I totally recognize how if you're watching someone pull out all of their gear, get everything rigged up, that can be an intimidating thing because you wonder, do I need all of that stuff? Do I need to buy all of that? How am I going to know where to start? So I think in general for the public, fly fishing can be intimidating because there's so much gear involved. There's a lot of different things that you need to learn right away. You're out in nature, maybe you're doing it by yourself, maybe you don't have anyone in your life that likes to fly fish. So I can totally understand how it can be intimidating, but that's what we're here today is to help relieve some of that intimidation and hopefully help you feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to getting started in the sport of fly fishing. I think for me, when I was young, I loved to fish. I grew up spending my summers in Canada with my family, and I would just fish off the end of a dock with worms and a bucket, and I'd fill the bucket up and I'd toss it overboard and dump the fish out, and I would do it over and over again. I knew I loved to fish, but the thought of fly fishing was a scary thought. It just seemed like a completely different sport. I didn't know how at all it was similar. It looked really hard. It looked like it took a lot of skill. It looked like there was a lot of gear involved. It looked expensive. So when I first began fly fishing, I was definitely hesitant if it was going to be the right thing for me. But I learned when I was a teenager in high school, and I quickly fell in love with the sport. And while it does take a little bit of knowledge and practice, certainly, it's something that you can easily pick up and use. The coolest thing about it is you can do it for the rest of your life. As a female in the sport of fly fishing, I can totally understand how it may be a little bit of an intimidating sport for another female to come into. And that's because it's a male-dominated sport. The industry is male-dominated, and it can feel certainly a little bit scary as a woman coming into the sport. But that being said, I know that almost all 99.9% of men that you meet are going to be completely welcoming and encouraging to you in the sport. And they're going to want to help you and make sure that you enjoy it and hopefully pick it up as something that you do in your everyday life. At the same time, I know many men that also have felt intimidated when getting into the sport of fly fishing. That comes from a different perspective. It's still a male-dominated sport, but for them, they feel the pressures of being a man and wanting to feel like they should know how to fish or know how to fly fish, and sometimes they struggle with asking for help or getting the right guidance, whereas sometimes women don't have that same fear of asking for help. So the best part about it is fly fishing is going to be fun for everyone on the water because it's a welcoming sport. We encourage each other. We're a community of anglers that want to make sure everyone's having a good day out there. So I think one of the coolest parts about being a female in the fly fishing world is that I can help other young women feel encouraged and excited about getting into nature and getting outside and fly fishing. So for me, it's really fun to guide anyone, teach them how to fly fish, but I especially love taking young women out on the river and teaching them that maybe fly fishing is not what they thought. It's not just a male sport. It can be for both men and women, and we all equally enjoy it just as much. Fly fishing is an extremely empowering sport. I've seen it in many different ways help individuals feel empowered, feel strong, and recover from different parts of life. I've seen it when people are suffering from an illness. They'll go out fly fishing, and all of a sudden, they've done something they never thought that they could do before. And that's kind of incredible to see that growth and that empowerment come from fly fishing. I've seen how fly fishing can help young adults empower themselves into being able to get outside on their own, be in nature, be outside in the wild, and do something that they never thought that they could do on their own. And for me, as a young woman, I remember that's the way that I felt when I started to fly fish and I started to catch fish and I started to do it on my own. Most importantly, get outside and be on my own. That's when I really felt this sense of empowerment and success, and I was proud of myself. And I think that's really what drew me to the sport in the beginning. Is it was something that just made me feel a lot of pride and excitement, and I could drive to a river by myself, and I could set up everything on my own. I could tie on my flies, and I could catch fish on my own, and that was so cool. And I loved that learning curve, and I love still today. I'm still learning, but I never go out in the river and have a bad day. Every single day is fun, no matter what, no matter the conditions, no matter how the fishing goes. Just being out there brings me so much joy, and I'm just so grateful that I had that sense of empowerment as a young woman, because I think we find it through all different ways of life. Some people find it through different sports or different aspects being outside, but for me, it was figuring out a way to get outside on my own in nature, interacting with wildlife, and do it on my own. That's what made me feel empowered and strong. I love fly fishing for so many reasons, but I think the most important thing to me is the amount of peacefulness and zen it brings to my life. Fly fishing is a focused sport, meaning you have to be present in order to succeed in it. And for me, the mindfulness that comes from that, having to be present right there, it allows me to let go of all the different stresses in my life. There's a lot of stuff going on in all of our lives, and it's really nice to have something that we can escape to and be present in and be focused on, and maybe let some of that stress go. So for me, I love fly fishing because it allows me to be present, be in the moment, and feel mindful. What's great about fly fishing is that there's almost an art form to it. If you've ever seen anybody casting a fly rod, I'm certain you've probably admired the look and the elegance and the finesse that it takes to be able to cast that fly rod. There's something so therapeutic and artful when it comes to fly fishing, and I think that is just ingrained in the sport in all aspects. It can come from the practice of casting, it can come from the environment in which you're fly fishing, it can come from the beautiful hand-tied flies that you're using. It's definitely one of the most elegant and delicate sports that there is, and I think that anyone who goes fly fishing appreciates the art form that it is. I think everyone likes to fly fish for their own reason, but a lot of the time these reasons overlap. So sometimes people love to get outside. That's why they're doing it. They're just there to get out in nature, be outdoors, whereas other people love to be out there and catching fish. And that's totally okay, whatever your reason is, as long as you're enjoying it and it brings you fulfillment. That's a great thing with fly fishing. So I think everyone has their own reason for fly fishing. It's not all the same. Some of them overlap, but for the most part, we all have our own why as to why we like to fly fish. And for me, it's to be outside and be outdoors. But for someone else, it might be to travel or to see different places through a different lens. And for another person, it might be because they love the satisfaction and enjoyment they get from catching fish. Fly fishing adds so much to life, and one of the best parts about it is that you can fly fish for your entire life. You can start out fly fishing as a child and fly fish until you're a very old person. It's kind of the one of the few things in life that you can do at any age, anywhere, and it brings, I think, a lot of people purpose in that sense in their life.